The human world. What applies to all the child's surroundings described so far must be said with special emphasis in relation to its human environment. It is impossible for a child to find its way into human society if it does not have the opportunity from the earliest age of growing into it through play and imitation. Everyone today has read publications on the developmental disturbances that appear in hospitalized children. They are looked after with an impeccable hygiene, but having no stimuli and no example to follow, they do not develop properly. They become spiritually and physically backward, and after a certain length of time in such an institution are lost to normal development. It was particularly impressed by a report on 2 Italian children's homes, which I read in an illustrated magazine over 10 years ago. One of them, an excellently run private home, took in children from wealthy families, for whom only the best was good enough for their babies. The well-trained staff worked impeccably, yet with all the children the typical developmental disturbances of hospitalization were noted. The second home, which was a part of a women's prison, was set up to care for the babies of convicted mothers, babies from just those circles where in normal life no one expects to meet neglected backward children. Here each child was cared for by its mother, who for this purpose was allowed to enter the children's home for a short time each day, and for whom these times with her children meant the only joy and variation in the routine of prison life. In contrast to the expensive establishment, this children's home was full of splendid children. It was the conspicuous difference in the development of the children in the 2 homes that prompted a doctor to write the report. The personal interest of the nurse, her caressing and fondling, make the child thrive. In recognition of this fact, the nurses in some Russian children's homes, I don't know in how many, are forbidden to talk to another while they are tending a child. Each one must speak and play exclusively with the child she is tending at that time. They have learned the importance to talking to children. To prevent the harmful effects of passing a child from one person to another, there was a custom in the municipal children's home of Lörrach, when I was training in baby care, that each child was looked after by its own particular nurse or trainee. Thus one could hear, "Angela, your Johnny is crying," and Angela had to go and see. The person who is most intensively concerned with the child in its first year holds a key position. It is up to that person to prepare the child for living among its fellow human beings. To make up later for what has been neglected in the first year is one of the great and arduous tasks of curative education. What every loving mother, aunt, grandmother, or elder sister manages without specialist knowledge during the first year requires a large stage, great and devoted commitment, work, and powers of the soul on the part of carefully trained people, which can never be adequately recompensed. As soon as the child lifts its little head and looks around, it wants to see everything. As soon as it can totter along and behind the adult, it wants to touch everything, and as soon also do everything. At the time, this can be pure horror. The chair is massaged with cream, the piano washed, the coffee grounds tipped into soup, the glue into the aquarium, and the paint thinner into the washing machine, all in the famous unguarded moment. At this stage, the infant in the kitchen or workroom is kind of natural disaster, Not every infant, but many. One of my two sons, who at this age could play for hours with 2 pins without doing himself any harm, turned into a problem when at the age of 3 he started knotting and tying all available strings, laces and ribbons together with furniture and toys into one big tangle. This nerve-wracking game remained his daily exercise for some time, and my leisure time occupation. Quite soon the infant can join in with the adults in their work. With a small broom, a mop, and a duster, he helps mother to clean the house. Spoons can be dried at an early age, and many a 4-year-old already does all the drying up. If father is repairing a car, it is advisable to cover the hammer our young apprentice is holding with a rubber tube, or to give him a rubber hammer in the first place. Depending on where one lives, it is possible even to send the youngest shopping, equipped with a small rucksack and a basket. A great deal of the interesting and exciting house and handiwork that children can grow into through play is nowadays done with machines. It is therefore all the more important not to deny children the chance to participate as much of it as possible. In the kindergarten of Lebenshilfe in Völklingen, the children are always followed to watch and help with the cooking of lunch. This may certainly make the work of the cooks more difficult, but for the children it's a real help for life. Living with one's fellow men is something that has to be learned. For some people it is easier, for others more difficult. Circumstances will sometimes be favorable for getting all well together. At other times it may not so favorable. Occasionally sacrifices have to be made to keep the peace. Nasty surprises await the person who does not know with whom he is dealing. Team games, indoor and outdoor, in fact any games that require a number of people, foster the abilities and the understanding for life and human society. Above all, the realization that one needs the others. It is impossible to play these games alone. How can one hide from oneself or catch oneself? Even playing one's right hand against the left in a board hand is not really so exciting. It is necessary then to find friends, and already the child has learned to behave in such a manner that others want to play with him. He learns either to give way or to lead, in the best circumstances both. It is to be hoped he also learns the difficult art of losing. There are, of course, some children naturally gifted with the art of losing a game after game and still remaining in the best of tempers throughout a whole evening. These are the ones who make easy contact, for whom the company is more important and interesting than winning a game. There are others who have to be helped in every way so that they do not lose their tempers every time their luck fails and thus become spoilsports. One can make it clear to them what a noble art it is to lose with grace, but above all one should teach them to distinguish between important and unimportant things, and not, for example, to lose a friend for the sake of a game. Once the spell is broken and our child plays with the others, it acquires a whole series of abilities which will give it stability in life. Judging character is one thing that is to be practiced. With hide and seek, it depends very much on who is searching. One always falls for the trick with the house corner, whereas another moves around so quickly that a very good hiding place is needed to escape detection. Where two leaders are allowed to choose their teams alternately from a crowd of children, precise judgments are made, and the situation clearly weighed up, until finally a small and clumsy ones are also distributed equally among both teams. Not only is there practice in judging each one by its capabilities and using him accordingly. You're quick and thin, you go as a scout. You're so strong, you guard the prisoners. The lesser possibilities for the small and weak ones are also taken into consideration and used. Possibly the reader now think that with all these many games the child allegedly needs, quite a lot is demanded of the parents. This is true. At least in cities, it demands a real effort if one wants to make it possible for children to conquer their surroundings through play. Happily, there are many parents for whom this seems worth the trouble, and they also manage to do it. It is much less troublesome and exciting to teach the poor things to read already at the kindergarten age. One does not need to get out of his armchair. The experts who lead the battle to teach children to read as early as possible emphasize again and again how much more quiet and well-poised early readers are than those who play, just as if quietness and poise were desirable in children. Well, of course the early readers can read all about the things of which they have been deprived, but instead of assimilating experience, they have information in their heads, and information is bound to be quite an adequate substitute for experience. The senses of these children are deprived of the manifold impressions which are needed to form them, and whilst the intellectual memory and the intellectual ability to learn are furthered intensively, other faculties and abilities atrophy and come badly off. This danger of atrophy, when the intellect is developed too early, particularly hinders the social abilities in such children. Occasionally one meets the intellectual wonder child, who, although the youngest, is top of the class and masters everything without effort. His schoolmates, however, do not want anything to do with him, and he is no more interested in them. He has no friends. It can remain like that throughout his life. He is always successful, passes all examinations brilliantly, but remains basically lonely. Although he is often asked for advice in technical matters, he is never consulted on problems of life itself. This is not because he was the top of his class, but because he was top too early, too young for this particular stage. If a child is top at the normal age of his class, he can act as its leader or be an asset to it in a less obtrusive way. There are opportunities enough for him to learn more than his classmates. An especially serious case of one-sided promotion of intelligence at the cost of social abilities is evident in the American girl Edith Stern. Various newspapers reported that she could read at the age of 2, could play chess at 3 or 4, as well as being at home in general history, and at 5 she could do arithmetic and was conversant in philosophy. At 16, a college employed her as a lecturer in higher mathematics. About this girl, her picture shows a dark-haired, podgy teenager with glasses. Her father said that she had no feeling for the joys and sorrows of her fellow human beings, was cold and calculating, knew neither remorse nor compassion, and never cried. The father who had produced this intellectual wonder at such an early age wanted to achieve the same for his son, but the mother did not permit it. The boy was to go to school like everyone else and become a normal child. The mother is not alone in her objections. The warning against too early an intellectual schooling for children accumulate, and they come from the most varied sources. Professor Bruno Bettelheim is head of a school for gifted but emotionally disturbed children in Chicago. In his deeply disturbing book, All About These Partly Incurable Children Who Have Been Made Ill, he tells of an autistic boy who had been intellectually pushed and put under great pressure from a very early age, among other things, through learning to read very young. As a consequence, the development of his social faculties had naturally suffered. When Bruno Bettelheim calls this result of too early reading natural, he knows what he's talking about, and we ought to believe him. If this is true, that an over-early emphasis on the intellectual side frequently results in or even causes an underdevelopment in social faculties, then we should think carefully about whether in these over-early readers a generation is not growing up, which, once we are old and can no longer be reckoned of any use, will not, in a very painless and human way, just do away with us. It will not be the intellectual abilities, but the social faculties of human beings that will on the whole make it possible to live on this earth in the future. One should keep this in mind. Where young people are growing up, computers can do calculation of every kind for us, but social imagination, moral imagination, these our technical slaves will never develop. These we ourselves have to develop. Of the many things and phenomena that a child of preschool age can know and really respond to without being intellectually stressed and burdened too early, I want to list a small selection. The seasons, the phases of the moon, the weather and precipitation, 2 or 4 constellations, Orion, the Great Bear, all the fruit and vegetables from the market, the different types of grain, and what they are used for, a few woodland and park trees, ornamental bushes and flowers, provided the parents to know them. The most important and dangerous poisonous plants. Only a single Class 2 boy recognized the deadly nightshade on a school outing and prevent his fellow pupils from consuming the supposed blueberries the teacher knew only by name. A few dog breeds, and all the birds that come to the bird table. True, a family living on the 15th floor of a high-rise block in the city occasionally sees a pigeon at the window, but apart from that, they assured me they see no other animals in the wild state, year in, year out. The names of all the objects and activities that the child sees in the house and in the neighborhood. Parents should describe and explain them using the correct terms. If there are workmen in the house, this provides a chance to learn the names of tools and watch how different things are done. A lot can be learned through watching. If building is going on in the neighborhood, the child can watch its progress and learn to recognize and name the machines and the different working processes, provided that someone shows and explains them to him. The child needs time, repetition, and additional explanations in order to cope with what he has been learned and experienced. If one is too lazy, too tired, too busy, or distracted to answer one's children's questions thoroughly and in such a way that they are really told what they want to know and need for their understanding, then one leads them away from any desire to learn and brings them up to be indifferent. There is no educational toy that will help, however expensive. Education is transmitted by illustrated books, unfortunately not by all. Before giving a child a book, one should check everything is correct. Children examine each illustration in detail and are annoyed by a carelessly illustrated book. A teacher gave us an example in a lecture for readers for beginners. One illustration showed the bars of a cage. A monkey hangs from above, but one does not see what he is hanging from. In the front of the cage stands a child and holds a banana in the air. The text says, "Where is the monkey? The monkey sits in the tree. Here, a nut. Come and eat, monkey." Such a book should go in the fire and not in the hands of children. The child's ability to combine ideas is impaired by carelessly put together books. It does not matter if the illustrations are only faint indications or extremely stylized. It must correspond to the text. Just as illustrated books help to make the world comprehensible, they should also awaken trust. Even where fantastical things are presented, the book must not contradict itself, least of all through negligence. Of quite a different nature is the upside-down world, where ideas are purposely interchanged. I take the room and sweep the brush. This mind is sharpened by this. At a certain age, rarely before the age of 6, children find this excruciating funny and like to try it out for themselves. So shoes and socks are put on the hands, legs are slipped into sleeves, arms into trousers, and a cheeky face grins one out of the fly. How sad the mother that is in a hurry to go to work and dismisses the joke of nonsense. I now want to list a number of the things which a child can already do by itself and should be able to do before starting school. Especially important, tying bows, for example on shoelaces. The method by which a 2-year-old know I learned is as follows. First, a simple knot is made. Then, part the both laces is doubled and a simple knot again tied. As long as enough ends have been left over, this makes a bow. At the age of 3, a child can dress and undress its own and rarely needs help. This can even become a favorite game. A girl of 3½ was visiting relatives. Her mother had packed her clothes, 2 pairs of long trousers, 3 or 4 jumpers, underwear, and perhaps even a dress. Although they were beautiful toys at her aunt, they could provide no competition against the enormous fun of trying on endless variation of these clothes. In continuously changing combinations, they provided stimulation and activity for many days. Even after returning home, packing clothes, going off on her travels, and changing remained a favorite game for quite some time. Fortunately, no one complained that clothes were not for playing. Why not? Perhaps some who never was allowed to play with clothes later has the greatest difficulty in dressing in such a way that she is also nice to look at. At an early age, a child can learn to fold its own clothes properly, and perhaps even small pieces of laundry. Laying and clearing the table, washing and drying up are matter of course. Many a 5-year-old can even prepare a simple meal. Mother does the sewing. Every child has certainly at some time tried snipping with scissors into new material or its own clothes. There are plastic scissors which really cut only paper, but it is advisable to try them before buying, as some do not even cut paper and are completely useless. Then embroidering pictures on a cardboard can be learned. A 4-year-old took great pains to sew and embroider a napkin bag for its much-loved grandmother, and she has preserved and used it for 20 years. Sewing on buttons, even with the proper stock, is great fun, and if it is not on father's pyjama, if it's on father's pyjama, it's also a great honor. However, father then also has to be pleased in the evening and find appreciative words. Otherwise, he destroys the child's joy in creating. Praise, appreciation, and participation in its joy are the crowning of all the child's efforts and achievements. If one indifferently denies these, or even just blames it, orders about and criticizes it all the time, one does not really love one child's and hinders the development of both its physical and mental faculties, even if one is otherwise all for intellectual advancement. Children have to learn how to behave in traffic before starting school in order to stay alive. Turning left and right can be practiced in the backyard with a scooter or a tricycle. The right, that is where he has the small mole, or the thumb where he sucks. Some kind of mark can be found on every child's hand. How to behave at traffic lights. One has to be careful. The child may be colorblind, so red is on top and green is on the bottom. It is good if children learn in good time not only to notice faults but also to rectify them. The wooden paving in the courtyard of the kindergarten became dangerous because individual blocks rose up, thus causing people to trip. The old-age pensioner who trims the hedges and does odd jobs out of the kindness of his heart, and because he loves the children, would eventually have to go round and do something about them. But no, he does not need to bother. A group of children dig up the offending blocks, deepen their sand foundation with small trowels, and replace them again all level. Since then, a conscientious 4-year-old checks the paving daily. A few weeks later, 2 children demolished a stool. With strong glue and a vise, the damage was repaired. However, the 2 did not want to let any of the other children help them. To repair something they have damaged is of high educational value to children, gives them great pleasure to the little vandals, and increases their self-confidence. Children also have to learn how to occupy themselves in their free time. Someone can do this naturally and can think of more things to do than they ever manage. The others have to learn it. One has to stimulate them, teach them skills. Otherwise, in holidays, there come the well-known maternal groans, "If only school would start again. This lot are really going on my nerves." The shorter working week brings with it increasingly more leisure time. When no interests and abilities have been developed, what remains to be done but illicit work or passive killing of time that has been so laboriously striven for? Teaching children to read as early as possible does not help in the least, nor does it help in a job, for there is important that one has to be learned and practiced many things so that one can rapidly acquire the specialist knowledge for the needed job. Neither is the television screen an educational instrument for small children. The television conveys information. An adult can critically assimilate this. Older school children should be also able to do so. For a small child, factual information is useless. It can be learned by heart, like Hickory dickory dock, but does not mean anything. Just how meaningless a piece of information can be was demonstrated by a little girl who had a baby brother when she was 3 and a half. After a difficult birth, the mother had to stay in the hospital for a long time, and could only wave to her little daughter through the window. Finally, mother and baby came home. "Tomorrow I shall tell everyone in the kindergarten that I have a baby brother," the little girl announced. "But did you not tell them before?" "No, I didn't know it. But we told you about it every day. You might have told me about it, but I didn't know it." There we have it. Our child does not want to be informed, it wants the experience. It wants to touch, have another look, ask. All this is impossible in front of the television. One can never say, "Stop, we want to stay a bit longer with that big animal," or "We want to stroke that lamb." Not even the favorite, "Do it again," is of any help. Any reaction of the child, any active participation in that what is offered, is suppressed, crushed by the on-running program, and it's trained out of him. Absolute passivity, the ideal consumer attitude, is bred. A film in the cinema, however, is preferable. One watches it oneself first, and then prepares the children for it. Then one can go and see it 2 or 3 times, and so let it become a real experience. Never will your eldest child forget the wonders of the prairie. With his brother, it was Grisnek's Serengeti, which was the start of an episode of rhinoceros, antelope, and zebra drawings. Television approaches us with the claim that it gives an account of reality. But adults who knows reality know how to judge this. But a child? For the child the television becomes a false witness. The cartoon cat is flattened, but soon it rises again to cause new mischief. A cowboy throws his arms into the air and falls off his horse. A Vietnamese present hut is blown into the air. Change of scene. Compassion? A world's famous orchestra gives a concert. A highly respected academic discusses a contemporary problem. Switch over. The thriller series is starting on the other channel. Respect? As flitting shadows, murderer and victim, a football star, the Pope, monsters, President Carter appear. At the push of the button, one disappears as fast as the other. How, then, is a sense of individuality, the real being of another person, supposed to develop in the inexperienced child?